One night, I packed up the last of my life in a U-Haul and headed south. At 27, I'd burned out in the city and figured a change of pace and scenery was exactly what I needed. I landed a night shift job at Manchac Port, right outside of New Orleans. The port sat practically on the edge of the Manchac Swamp, a place I'd only ever heard described in hushed tones. I found a small, single-story house a few miles from the port. It was cheap, slightly raised on blocks against the inevitable flood, and backed up right against the thick, black line of cypress and moss that was the swamp. When I first moved in, the air was so heavy and humid it felt like breathing soup, and the silence at night was profound, broken only by the buzzing of insects and the occasional croaking of a giant bullfrog. The job was stacking crates, logging inventory, and generally babysitting $1 million of cargo. It was monotonous and lonely until I met Larry. Larry was in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, lean, perpetually smelling faintly of tobacco and swamp water, and the only other person crazy enough to take the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift with me in my section. He was quiet but friendly. A few weeks in, sitting on a couple of overturned oil drums during our break, I cracked a joke about the spooky atmosphere. Larry didn't laugh. "You won't be laughing long, Mikey," he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "You're working on the edge of the Manchac now. That swamp, it ain't just water and trees." Larry gave me the first real warning. He spoke about the swamp folk, a mix of shadow people, restless spirits, and the truly dangerous, vengeful voodoo priests whose rituals and sacrifices had cursed this land for generations. He told me about the bad things that had happened deep in the muck. Voodoo rituals for power, offerings to dark spirits, and the kind of violence that lingers long after the blood is gone. He'd only ever look at the ground when he talked about it, like saying the words out loud was an invitation. Not long after that talk, the paranormal experiences started. I was sitting in my backyard one warm, pitch-black night, trying to decompress after work. That's when I heard it, a low, clear whistle coming from the edge of the swamp line. It wasn't the wind. It sounded almost human, but too musical, too inviting. It made the hair on my arms stand up. Another time, I heard children laughing, a chorus of tiny, joyful sounds that felt horribly out of place. Manchac is no place for kids, and the sounds seemed to swirl just beyond my sight, fading into the moss and muck. I'd also hear weeping, a faint, mournful sound, like a woman crying into her hands, always coming from the deep cover of the trees. The lights were the worst. Weird light, orbs sometimes blue, sometimes a sickly green would float right above the swamp water like eerie lanterns. They weren't fireflies, and they didn't move like anything natural. They were just there, watching. At work, the port felt like a stage for an audience I couldn't see. I'd be alone in the inventory section, and I'd clearly hear voices, muffled and indistinct, whispering my name or speaking in some strange, guttural language. Then came the random footsteps, heavy boots on the concrete that would stop just behind me. I'd whirl around, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, but there was never anyone there. That's when I started seeing him, the Hat Man. A flicker of movement in my peripheral vision, a shadow taller and darker than any man, wearing what looked like an old-fashioned brimmed hat. He wasn't solid, just a void that moved, and every time I turned to face him, he'd be gone. I told Larry about it. Everything. The whistles, the laughs, the Hat Man. He'd just grunt, stare out at the swamp, and mutter something like, "Didn't I tell you, Mikey? Leave well enough alone." He never wanted to talk about it, and his silence was more unnerving than anything I'd seen. The tension was building, a coil winding tighter around my chest. One night, a blood-curdling scream ripped through the silence of the swamp, a sound of pure terror and pain, before it was suddenly, sickeningly cut off. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I was standing on my back porch around 1 a.m. The air was thick and absolutely still. The whistling started up again from the swamp, closer this time, almost right on my property line. It was that same mesmerizing, chilling tune. My curiosity against all common sense, was winning. I took a step toward the tall grass. Then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, breathing heavy. A woman's voice, rough and urgent, cut through the line. "Don't look. Don't look," she hissed. "Do you hear that whistling? Ignore it. You hear it again, you bolt the door and stuff your ears. He'll think your curiosity is an invitation to him. Now hang up. Hang up." The line went dead. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst. The whistling stopped instantly, replaced by a low, humming silence that felt infinitely worse. The next day, I asked the only house near me if they knew anything. An older couple answered, utterly confused. They told me they had been out of town for a week visiting family. After that, the house became a problem. I'd catch shadows walking across the walls in the corner of my eye, every time. It was the Hat Man, I knew it. Things started missing, only to show up days later in the most bizarre places: my car keys under a pile of folded laundry, my wallet in the microwave. I'd tell myself it was just exhaustion, the grind of the night shift getting to me. I was tired, always tired. Then came a night that broke me. I was working in the old, cavernous storage section of the port, an area where the lights always flickered and the air was cold. I was logging a new shipment of machinery, utterly alone. Suddenly, that feeling, that prickling, intense certainty that someone was watching me came on like a sudden fever. In the corner of my eye, I saw it. Larry. He was peeking at me from behind a towering stack of wooden crates. Just the side of his face, his eyes wide open and staring, fixed on me with an unsettling, blank intensity. My heart dropped to my stomach. A wave of ice-cold dread hit me. He looked wrong, his face pale and drawn. I watched, paralyzed, as Larry's head slowly, deliberately pulled back behind the crate. "Oh, what's up, Larry? Thought you went home already." I called out, my voice shaking a little. I walked quickly around the corner of the crates, my flashlight beam cutting a frantic arc. He was gone. The walkway was long and straight. There was no other way out. And then, at the far end of the walkway, I saw it. The Hat Man. The tall, dark shadow, its brimmed hat unmistakable, walking swiftly and disappearing behind the very last stack of crates. I stumbled back, hyperventilating, and ran toward the nearest group of workers. I just saw Larry. He was behind a stack of crates. "Did you see him go out?" I asked, breathless. They stopped what they were doing and exchanged confused, worried looks. They looked at each other, then back at me. "Mikey, I don't know what you're talking about." One of them, a big guy named Dan, finally said, his voice hesitant. He swallowed hard. Larry's been dead for a couple of months now." My blood ran cold. He died in an accident right here on the job. Under mysterious circumstances, another guy added, looking everywhere but at me. Dan stepped forward, his eyes full of pity. "The job posting you answered? You were hired to replace Larry." A couple of days later, I handed in my 2-week notice. I didn't even stay the 2 weeks. I just packed my bags and left the keys on the counter of that little house. I told my boss I couldn't take it anymore. I always felt like I was being watched and the nights were killing me. But the truth is, I knew the Hat Man had seen me. I knew the ghost of the man I call my friend was just a terrified spirit, and the Hat Man was something worse, something that used the dead to lure the living. And I knew the whistle was for me. I was afraid that the curiosity I'd shown when I reached for that door was the invitation it had been waiting for. I didn't go far right away. I slept on a coworker's floor for a week, body buzzing like I'd swallowed a hive. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that whistle, the deliberate notes curling under my skull like a hook. I started doing stupid things, keeping the TV on with volume low, sleeping with boots on, keeping a box cutter under my pillow like that could do anything. I taped a towel along the bottom of the bedroom door to block the hallway light because shadows were pooling there like oil. I still had to go back to the house to grab the last of my stuff. I waited until noon, the safest hour I could imagine, sun high and stupid and loud. The swamp didn't care. The heat slapped me on the porch, and the wood gave a little under my step, damp and swollen. The latch stuck. Inside smelled like pennies and mildew. My breath fogged a mirror that was already fogged. The tap dripped in the kitchen, even though I'd shut the water off the day I left. This is where things get muddy in my head, like someone stirred the memory with a stick. I remember opening the hall closet to get my winter coat and finding my coat neatly folded on the shelf. I never fold anything. Under was an old cigar box that wasn't mine. Inside, a rosary, a rusted fish hook, 3 teeth not human, and a Polaroid of my house from the trees. The angle was from the swamp side. The corner of the photo was damp and smell brackish. I felt watched and dumb for feeling watched because of course I was. I tucked the box under my arm and told myself I had 10 minutes and then I was gone for good. The bathroom mirror caught me wrong as I walked past. For a blink, it wasn't me. It was a silhouette, the hat, that long profile, and my stomach flipped like I'd been pushed. I slammed the door so hard a tile popped loose and rattled into the tub. From the backyard, something answered. Not a whistle, just breath, as if the whole swamp took a deep inhale and held it. Pressure climbed into my ears. My own pulse got too loud. I should have left. I didn't. I told myself I was being dramatic, and I went into the bedroom to grab the last box of shirts and whatever. The light bulb in the ceiling hummed and then popped off like it had tried to whisper and choked. I shook my phone. No signal bars. I don't know why I always shake it, like there's a loose battery I can rattle into place. From the closet came the sound of wire hangers knocking each other. Not swinging, knocking. 1, 2, 3, 4. A little pause. 1, 2, 3. It sounded like a rhythm I should have known, and the part of me that deals with normal problems, rent, and oil changes started negotiating. If it's a raccoon, I can live with that. If it's the AC, I can call a guy. If it's... The closet door nudged open like a mouth trying on a word. The smell hit me, swamp and tobacco, and something copper sweet underneath. I stuck my hand in and felt for the pull string, fingers brushing cheap plywood and the cool, gritty curve of the string. I pulled. The bulb inside the closet hissed and gave me a slice of light. On the floor, neatly lined up like someone dressed a paper doll and got bored, were my boots, then my jeans, then my shirt. The clothes I'd worn the night, I heard children laughing. I didn't realize I was backing up until I hit the bed with my calves and sat down hard. The mattress wheezed a cloud of hot dust. Under that rancid smell, I caught Larry, or what my memory wrapped around Larry. The single pack-a-day stink you stop noticing. There was the tiniest sound of someone wetting lips with their tongue. It was very close to my ear. "Leave well enough alone," said Larry's voice, a perfect drag off the bottom of a coffee cup. But Larry's voice wasn't shaped inside a mouth. It was shaped in the room, around the wires and the mattress springs. He was in the space, not in the throat. "You ain't packed the right thing, Mikey. What do you want?" I asked because I always end up asking questions I don't want the answers to. My own voice sounded wrong, too bright. Not me. The mattress dipped next to my hip, a half-inch, like someone sat and put their weight on their hands. He wants to look. He eats it. You've been feeding him." The light in the closet flickered. I stared into the slice, as if staring could anchor me. My folded clothes twitched, the tiniest twitch, like a finger under a bedsheet. The hat in the mirror behind me rose an inch taller. And if you don't think a shadow can smile, I'm telling you it can. You just don't see teeth. You see the part of a grin that is patience. I grabbed a cigar box. The Polaroid of my house had bled at the edges. New watermarks, seeped in from the corners like the swamp, was inside the photo too, rising. I shoved the box into my backpack, and I left without shutting the front door. It whined on its hinges, and then the house exhaled and the door eased shut on its own like a teacher who's tired of asking. At the end of the road is the gas station that smells like fryer oil. I pulled in and parked crooked across 2 spots and sat there shaking until the shaking felt performative and then it got real again. I went inside for coffee. I didn't want, just to stand near people, to hear a lottery ticket scanner chirp, to watch a teenager wipe a counter. The clerk had that Cajun drawl you can wrap yourself in if you're lucky. I wasn't lucky. "You good?" she asked, not looking up, the way people ask when they've heard worse. "There a payphone?" I said, because my cell still had no bars even at noon in the middle of the lot, and I hated how my voice stuck to the back of my throat like syrup. "Round the side," she said, nodding toward the ice chest and the pallets stacked with watery wood. The payphone was sun-faded, the cord frayed to metal in a couple spots. I didn't have change. I picked it up anyway. The line clicked alive with a softness that felt like the phone was swallowing a gasp. Then, without a coin, without me dialing, a woman said, "Mikey." I didn't jump. My body was past jumping. It felt like I'd been in a car that fishtailed, and I'd already decided not to correct it. "Who are you?" I asked. "Who the hell are you?" You heard the whistling again. Her voice was the same as the unknown call, rough, urgent, like she'd run up a flight of stairs. "Stop feeding him. Don't look. Don't ask. Don't touch nothing that ain't yours. Don't follow lights. Don't answer knocks if they come from low. He sends the knocks on the bottom of doors. What do you want from me?" I was crying. I didn't notice when it started. It wasn't dramatic. It was my body leaking because it couldn't hold more. "Not me," she said, echoing the line I'd just heard in my empty house. "I'm telling you how to make him choke. Don't give him the look. If you hear the whistle, you make noise, any noise, pots, radio static, put the tap on until it squeals. He don't like the ugly sound of living. He don't like you this close to his water with your curiosity like a lantern." "Who are you?" I asked again because I needed a noun. I needed something to blame or thank. "Are you a dispatcher? Don't hang up. Please. Don't come here at night," she said. "Don't come to the water when the frogs go quiet. And don't go back to the port. He learned your steps there. He got your rhythm. That's how he gets his hand on your shoulder without you feeling it till later." "Who are you?" I said again, because the coin slot was empty and the line shouldn't be alive, and it felt like if I got a name, I could nail this voice to the world. "She used to be called Nurse," she said, and for a second, I had an image of a woman with a plastic badge on a lanyard, coffee stains on her scrubs. Then midwife. Then something else before that. Her voice shook once, the way a deer shakes rain off, and went steady again. "And don't bring that box into your car." I hung up and immediately picked the phone back up. Dead. Nothing. I stood there with the receiver to my ear until the clerk poked her head around and said, "You need something, baby?" And I said, "No, thank you," so automatically my mouth didn't even move. I went back to the car and stared at the backpack on the passenger seat like it had a snake in it. I unzipped it and pulled the cigar box out like I was handing a cop my license. The wood was damp. The damp wasn't on my fingers, it was inside the grain. I didn't want it in my car. I didn't want it in the trash can right by the door either, where some kid would lift it, and that would be a whole new problem I couldn't live with. I took it to the ditch that runs behind the gas station and set it on the broken concrete. There was water in the ditch, slushy and film thin, glittering with oil. A dragonfly landed on the lid and rubbed its forelegs like a priest washing hands. "Okay," I said to the ditch. "Okay, you can have it," like I was negotiating with a landlord. When I walked away, the lid of the box clicked once, and I didn't look back because I'm not always a coward, I can learn. I didn't go back to the port, but the port came with me in the way smells do, in the way the rhythm of a forklift reverser haunts your ear and then turns into a voice in the shower. Dan texted me, "You good? Heard you quit." It was the middle of a Wednesday afternoon, and I was sitting in a laundromat because the machines sounded like rain, and I couldn't stand the idea of my apartment being quiet. I typed back, "Yeah, had to bail. Personal stuff." He replied, "You hear they finally replaced you?" I stared at the message and typed, "Good," then deleted it and typed, "What happened to Larry, really?" And deleted that and typed, "Who called EMS when Larry died?" And deleted that. At 2 in the morning, when the laundromat's last dryer was going and the TV in the corner was playing a car commercial with the sound off, my phone buzzed with a new text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Are you alone?" I started to type, "Who is this?" And then the phone vibrated with another. "Is the faucet on?" Then another. "Put it on." Water. Ugly sound of living. I looked at the sink in the corner, a deep, white, chipped thing with a metal lip that had bitten the edge of every bucket in a 50-mile radius. I turned the tap. The pipes juddered and a cough of brown came out, then clear. The smell of iron and river bottom filled the room. Outside, something whistled and then it stopped like a laugh cut off by a hand. I didn't sleep. I watched socks churn behind glass and counted to 7 over and over because 7 was the number of notes in the whistle. I don't know how I knew that. I knew it the way you know the number of steps between your bed and the bathroom in the dark. The next day, I forced myself back to the house to turn in the keys and do a last walkthrough because even panic doesn't stop leases. This time I brought someone, my cousin Eve, who has the kind of energy that makes cops second-guess their instincts. Eve doesn't believe in anything except bills paid on time and the right to tell anyone to fuck off. She drove her truck like the road was borrowed time. "You look like shit," she said, stepping out with a baseball cap pulled low and a knife clipped to her pocket. "Don't make me catch swamp rabies for nothing." "Watch your step," I said. "The porch is soft." "Yeah." She stomped once on purpose and the porch groaned but held. "Heard about your old man, ghost friend. You bring me all the way out to play Ghostbusters, I'm gonna invoice you." Inside, the air was thick like the last breath in a bar before closing. My keys clinked in my sweaty palm. I moved room to room like a landlord in my own life, checking cabinets, sweeping a hand along a shelf, watching dust blur in the sun. In the bedroom, the closet bulb was dark again and the string damp, as if someone had licked it. I didn't pull. I pretended I was done. In the kitchen, Eve flicked the faucet. It squealed at the start, that ugly living sound, and I was grateful for how petty and real it was. She opened the pantry and said, "What's with the bones?" I was there in 2 steps. On the pantry floor, arranged in a ring like a bracelet with a loose clasp, lay tiny bones. Bird, maybe mouse. In the center was a flattened frog, chest open, gray-white and chalky. It hadn't been there 2 days ago. "Someone's messing with you," Eve said, and brushed the bones away with her boot like it was confetti. I grabbed her wrist without thinking, and she yanked it away because she doesn't like being touched without deciding. "Don't touch it," I said. "Please, Evie, don't." "Don't what?" "Feed your ghost. This whole place is rot with or without your hat guy. You hearing yourself." She turned to me and softened barely. Hey, you don't look." She tapped her own eyes with 2 fingers. "Whatever your brain is doing, you practice not looking. That's how I handle intrusive bullshit. Not the same, I know, but try." We took one last loop. I locked the back door, and the hair rose on my neck because it felt like someone leaned in to watch me turn the deadbolt. The door has a window with a curtain. Through a gap at the edge of the curtain, the swamp watched back in dappled green like an animal's back. There was the faintest noise, a whistle, try to be a word. I coughed on purpose, loud and ugly. The whistle cut. "Let's go," Eve said. "You're pale." She drove. I stared at the lip of the passenger window, where the rubber seal had cracked and curled like a dry leaf. The crack looked like a smile without teeth. Not everything is a sign, but tell that to my nerves. We merged onto the highway. A flatbed passed in the left lane with a load strapped down under a blue tarp. The tarp flapped out a corner and snapped like a flag. For a second, it looked exactly like a coat sleeve waving hello, and I said no out loud to nothing. Eve slapped the steering wheel and said, "Fuck that," to the air, and then, like the air agreed, my phone buzzed again. "Are you safe?" The number asked. I typed with someone. "We're leaving." The reply came, "Good. Keep ugly sounds on tonight." I crashed on Eve's couch. She put a box fan at the foot of it, aimed up my body like a dog sticking its head out a window. The fan clattered on one bent blade, making a sound like a coin spinning on a table and never quite settling. I loved that noise so much it made my mouth ache. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the whistle slipping under the fan's clatter like a hand under a shirt. It came from the kitchen sink. I got up, turned the tap. The pipes banged. Right after that, a knock came from low on the back door, 3 little knuckles rapping near the bottom panel like a child. Eve sat up on the other couch with a spring-loaded motion, grabbed the knife, and said, "No, to the door like she was scolding a dog. Another knock, higher this time. "No," she said again, calm as a nurse. "You got business with my cousin. You do it outside my house." Then softer to me, "You don't look." We sat there until dawn painted the cheap curtains into stained glass. When I finally slept, I dreamed of Larry under the water, not drowning, just disappointed. He held a cigarette between two fingers, and it burned slow, even wet. Behind him, in the cypress shadows, something taller than the trees breathed, and the air around its mouth bubbled. Every story needs a point where you either run or you turn around. I did both in the dumbest way. I called the port supervisor to get Larry's emergency contact information. I told myself I was doing it to send a condolence card. I told the supervisor I wanted to tie up loose ends. He told me I should leave it alone. I told him I couldn't. He sighed like a man who's watched other men reach into fan blades and gave me a name. Dolores LaRue, last known number out in Laplace. "Mama," he said, or "Aunt," or something. I dialed. It rang once, and then a voice picked up and didn't say hello. I heard frogs. I heard a stove pilot tick-ticking under a pan. "Ms. LaRue," I asked. "Who is this?" The voice was old, but the crackle in it wasn't weakness. It was ignition. "My name's Mike. I worked with Larry." Silence. Frogs. "Aspuntucha apart." "You didn't," she said finally. "He been done." "I know," I said. I looked at the fan in Eve's living room, the way its shadow spun across the ceiling. He helped me. I thought he was alive. He wasn't. He saved me anyway. I think he saved me. "You opened a door, and he closed it for you," she said flatly. "Now you mad he closed it hard." "I'm not mad," I said. I'm scared. Something's whistling. You know about it." Another pause stretched long. "They tell me not to say words to you folk," she said eventually. "You think words fix it. They feed it. But you sound like you're gonna do something dumb if I don't give you something to hold." "I won't," I lied. "I'll listen." "That what they all say." A chair scraped. "Listen then. You like how you look at what you ain't supposed to. You like the want in your eyes. That shine. That salt to him, sweet and salt both. You don't give him a plate, he goes somewhere else. You give him a plate, he sit down right on your chest. You send the little ones to see if you set a place. The lone knocks, the children laugh. That's the little ones. You put on your dead like a hat. You don't wear the hat, he is the hat. You understand me? He is shaped that use other shapes so you look longer. He borrowed my boy's smell for a while. Her voice fumbled once and caught itself. He don't get to keep it. Not long as I keep the kettle singing and the pots banging and the dog barking. You got a dog, boy. No, I said. I have a fan. Fan's fine. Radio between stations is better. Sound like the ocean to them. Sound like the edge of where they can be. You make that sound and you talk like you're cleaning a fish. You don't plead. You don't cry. He make the cry for you in your own voice if you let him. Don't give him the look. If you see his shadow, you count something alive. Teeth, fingers, anything. Keep the look on your own body. Counting, I said, like she'd handed me a knife. You want to know why he come? She asked. I didn't answer. The question hung like a noose. You went to the water with interest in your mouth. That's all. That and you knew. They like the new ones. You don't have calluses on your soul yet. They love a soft hand. I didn't know what to do with that except hold it. Who called me? I asked. Who warned me not to look the first night? It wasn't you, was it? Midwife, she said, and I heard the capital letter. She helped bring you through if you halfway. She don't like him. He don't like her. She used to bring babies. Now, she keeps some folks from being born into his mouth. That's all I'll say. I want to bring him something, I said. I don't know where it came from, but there it was, fully formed, stupid, and hot. I want to bring him something of mine he'll take, and then he'll leave me alone. Like a trade. You can't bargain with a rip current. Her laugh was small and humorless, and it sounded like the first knife cut into a lemon. You throw something in, it all go. That's what a rip is. It don't want you. It want a shape to make a hole. You get away from the hole. That it. You hear that whistle. You make steam sing. You make your insides ugly with noise. You hold a kitchen spoon in your mouth if you need to. He hate the metal taste. That where he from don't have metal. Where is he from? I asked before I could stop myself, and I felt the word look slip out of me and into the line like a fish. Don't, she said, and her voice went sudden and sharp. Don't look that way. Count your teeth. Hang up. Thank you, I said. I am sorry. You are, she said, and she hung up. That night, I took her advice like medicine. I set the radio between stations and let the static ride the walls. I put a pot of water on and cracked the burner so the gas hissed and the kettle lid jittered. I held the spoon in my mouth by the bowl, not the handle, lips curled around cold metal like a kid playing war. I looked at my hands and I counted. 10, 10, 10. I counted my fingers until my tongue hurt from pressing the spoon. The whistle came at 2:07. It was softer this time, testing the corners. The static growled. The kettle jittered. The whistle slid down the glass of the window like a finger leaving a print you can't see. I didn't look. I looked at my thumbnail and the crescent of dirt where I'd chewed it too low. The whistle pushed once more, and then it slipped away into the trees and pulled the frogs quiet with it for a count of 7. And then the frog started again like a church starting a hymn. I slept after that the way you sleep after a fever breaks, twitchy and grateful and suspicious. In the morning, I found a cigar box again on my kitchen table next to my elbow. I had left it in a ditch. I had watched it fade into the heat. The wood looked drier now, splintered along one edge like it had been pried open by someone with fingernails like screws. I didn't touch it. I put the kettle on again. I put the box on the stove and turned the burner on low the way I'd warmed tortillas. The wood darkened and a little smoke rose up, sweet and wrong. The Polaroid inside curled like a dead bug and then flared. The rosary cracked. The teeth clicked. I turned on the vent hood and let the fan swallow the bitter smoke because some smells you don't let live. My phone vibrated. The number that had asked me if I was safe sent one word. Careful. I typed it's gone. The reply came, nothing's gone. Don't give him a story. He likes stories with neat ends. My hand shook so hard I had to set the phone down. A neat end would be a blessing. I thought about disappearing to another state, to a desert or a mountain, but the truth is you keep the shape of your own want. I could move my body, but the shine in my I would still be mine, and he's not a dog you can shake by crossing a creek. Around sundown, Eve came by with takeout and 6 cheap wind-up alarm clocks she'd bought at a hardware store. Timer symphony, she said. Every time you think of looking at a window, wind one. Let them go off angry. His problem, not yours. We set them around the apartment and wound them until the tick-tick-tick made conversation syncopated. Between that, the radio hiss, and the kettle breathing like a patient in a hospital bed, the place felt crowded with the living. It also felt unhinged. The air vibrated, but I could breathe. What's the plan? She asked through a mouthful of fried shrimp. Because we can't play Ship of Theseus with fans forever. The plan is to starve it, I said, and hated how little conviction my voice had. Not feed him the look. Cool. Love that. Totally actionable. She tossed me a hush puppy. I caught it barely. You gonna go to work? New work, I mean. Or are you gonna become a full-time whistle avoider? I can't go back to the port, I said. He learned me there. I hated the way that sounded, but it was right. I'll find something inland. Inland, she said, and she looked at my wall like she could see through it to every inch of swamp between here and the Gulf. Buddy, this whole place is a bowl. But okay, we'll make you a city mouse. We didn't sleep. The alarms went off one by one at different times because we had wound them bad, and every time a bell screamed, the whistle outside paused if it was trying to start. This was the first time I felt something like victory since this began. It was small and petty and smelled like hot metal, but it was mine. At 3 a.m., someone knocked at the door low, each knock soft and polite like a kid afraid to wake a baby. Eve stood and put the knife in her back pocket. No, she said to the bottom of the door. Wrong house. The knocks went a little higher, then higher still, then up near the handle like aspiration. We did not answer. The knock stopped. The whistle came once like a tongue against teeth and then stilled, and I felt the thing lean its forehead against the door and listen to our blood. I counted my teeth. I counted the loose stitch on my couch cushion. I didn't look. The next day, I got a job offer from a warehouse farther inland, closer to Baton Rouge. Day shift. I should have taken it without telling anyone. Instead, like a dumb kid going back to a place he left his pride, I drove to Manchac-Port to pick up my last paycheck in person. In and out, Eve said, and she bought earplugs for me and a canned air horn that looked like a joke but wouldn't be one if we used it. The port at noon looks like any port. Cranes like praying mantis heads, gulls like trash angels. My badge still opened the side gate because admin never updates anything on time. The office smelled like fried catfish and toner. Dan hugged me in an awkward one-arm way and slid the envelope across the counter. "You sure?" he asked. "You could do days." "I'm sure," I said, and I heard how tired sure is. On the way back to the truck, Eve paused by the long storage building where the lights always flickered. The shadows in there have a weight daytime can't lift. You can feel how night will sit in it later. "You want a last look?" she said, teasing, and then winced because she heard herself. "No, sorry, that's on me." I stared into the cool, concrete throat of the building and told myself I was counting forklifts. I told myself I was counting the red exit signs and the way the sunlight made a coin of bright on the floor near the far door. But at the bottom of the look, past the counting, was the hope that I would see Larry doing something small and alive, like scratching his collarbone, and I hated myself for that. Hope is a look wearing a costume. Something moved near the far coin of light. Not the Hat Man. A child, maybe 5, in a little yellow raincoat too clean for here, stood with his back to us, hands at his sides. He lifted one hand and scratched his neck the way I'd hoped Larry would. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. He put her hand on my elbow and squeezed hard enough to bruise. The kid tilted his head as if he were listening to instructions whispered into his hood. Eve said, soft and furious. "Nope." She raised the air horn and pressed the trigger. The sound that came out punched the air flat. It hit my chest like a shove. The child shape jittered, went thin, stretched, became a stripe of dark across the floor that tried to find a crack to fall through and couldn't. The whistle came, but it came from all directions at once and had no mouth, and it was furious. My eyes went wet and my ears went hot, and I wanted to drop to my knees and cut them off. We ran to the truck like idiots, for real now, not on TV. Eve backed out too fast. The tires threw gravel. Dan stood in the doorway blinking like a lizard in sun and said, "What in?" And then we were gone. The next 96 hours, I lived like a man, trying to learn a new religion by doing everything wrong. I messed up and looked more times than I'll admit. And every time, something learned me a little better. He changed tactics. He stopped whistling some nights and started talking low. Not words, just the murmur of a voice behind the wall, exactly the way you hear a neighbor on the other side of a cheap apartment sheetrock. He sent dreams that weren't dreams, of the port flooded to the ceiling and the crates pried open by hands I didn't want to picture. He sent Larry's laugh once, not how Larry laughed, but an impression that would fool anyone who never loved him. He sent the children again, just the smell of their raincoats, vinyl and mud. He thumped the bottom of doors at a tempo that matched my heart, so that every time he hit what I felt my pulse slap the base of my tongue, and I'd nearly open just to break the rhythm. The nurse midwife voice texted me like she had a job to do. Turn on a fan. Count objects that won't move. Don't touch offerings. He's not a person. I asked once, what is he then? She sent back a habit. Like rot. Like tide. I said, why me? She waited an hour and said, because you looked with love. Don't be ashamed. Just stop. Try telling a man to stop loving curiosity. Try telling that to someone raised on Wikipedia at 3 a.m. and late-night YouTube rabbit holes. I was the right kind of idiot. He saw me and said, that one. I did stop feeding him enough to starve him thin. I can't prove this part, but I felt him get lighter at the edges like a fog that burned away from the margins inward. The static we kept up chewed the night into digestible chunks. The alarms went off, shredding quiet into confetti. The kettle sang until the whistle's notes had to slide under like rats under a door. We started winning, one ugly sound at a time. On the fourth night, the nurse texted, "He'll try a bargain. Listen and don't." I typed, "With what?" She wrote, "With yourself. He'll wear you and talk to you. He likes to end with a choice." He did. I woke to my own voice from the kitchen saying, "I'm so tired." In a whine I've heard on my worst days, the one I don't let out because it sounds like failure. The voice in the kitchen said, "Buddy, we can just go out back and take a look and then we'll be done." It came with the sound of the back deadbolt turning, too slow, too careful. I lay on the couch with a spoon in my mouth and counted the stitches on the quilt Eve's grandma made. I counted and drooled around steel. The voice in the kitchen said, "Tender as a lover. We're just checking if it's gone." And the door latch tugged. Eve sat up in her chair without looking at the door. "Mikey," she said. "What's your middle name?" I said it through the spoon. She nodded. "Okay, if that door opens." We scream at it until our throats bleed. The latch stopped tugging. The voice sighed. It sounded exactly like me, and I hated it more than anything that's ever met my ears. It patted the door with my rhythms. Then it went away, and the low, pleasant murmur of frogs came back like a living pulse. I breathed for the first time in what felt like a week. I put the spoon on the table, and the metal clink was the sweetest bell I've ever heard. We made it till morning. I should have felt safe. Instead, I felt like rubber bands after holding a thing for too long, stretched past shape, haunted by the form I'd been holding. I made coffee strong enough to taste a horse and drank it with my hand wrapped around the hot mug to remind my skin where my edges were. Eve laughed at nothing and then stopped laughing and rubbed her face and said, "2 more nights." That's my line. I can do 2 more. Then we move you and we never say hat out loud again. You got me. I got you. I said, "I am sorry." Don't be sorry for being haunted. Be sorry if you get boring. She pointed at me. Stay weird. Don't get boring. That's how people die out here. I didn't say that staying weird is exactly what got me into this. That afternoon, as if the world remembered it had jokes, a church lady came to the door with pamphlets. She had a floral dress and brave hair, and she knocked high, the right way. When I opened, she wrinkled her nose at the static and the kettle and the ticking, and she said, "We're sharing the good news," and my laughter came out like a sneeze. I took her flyer and I nearly told her everything because she looked like someone who would hold a secret with 2 hands and a hymn, but I didn't. She gave our living room one more skeptical glance and said, "The Lord doesn't like confusion," and I wanted to tell her that confusion is a tool, and right now it's ours. The sun went down slow, The frogs got loud, then went silent like they'd all seen a cop. The kettle breathed. The radio hissed. The clocks ticked. I held the spoon in my mouth like a bit. The whistle started, very soft, as if it had its hand on the knob of my volume and wanted to show me it could sing or not sing, and both are the same to it. It wandered along the windows and I didn't follow it. And then it came from the door and I didn't go. And then it came from the bathroom's ceiling vent. And for a second, I understood how you can go crazy or become holy because there's a thin line and it's made of listening. I closed my eyes and counted my teeth. When I ran out of teeth, I counted the tiny cracks in my thumbnail. When I ran out of cracks, I counted the sounds we'd made. Kettle, fan, radio, clocks. Then, like a man deciding the world isn't interesting anymore, the whistle stopped. The silence was worse. It was shaped like a question. I don't know how long we held it. My eyes burned for not blinking. Eve whispered, "He's bored." And I nodded because bored is dangerous. Bored makes a thing creative. The blow came from under the floor, right under my couch. A solid boom like a sledgehammer hitting the joist. The couch jumped an inch. I bit the spoon hard enough to taste blood. Another blow, under the kitchen this time. Another under the door. It went around the perimeter, a ring of knocks, and stopped under the window like a drummer with a metronome in his heart. The glass flexed a hair and then stilled. Then the phone on the table lit up with an unknown number and rang. I stared at it. Eve stared at it. It rang and rang, and when I didn't pick up, it stopped. A text came instead. "Open up, buddy. It's me. My own name, my cadence, my punctuation. I turned the phone face down. The screen lit the table like a UFO in a cheap movie. Another text. Don't be weird. Come on. It's over. The kettle chose that moment to scream for real as the water rolled hard. I lifted the kettle and the whistle rose for a moment as the lid adjusted, and then I put it back and it settled into a steadier cry. Over that, under it, through it, the low syllables of the not voice began to murmur along the baseboards. It didn't need words anymore. It had my steps, it had my keys, it had the shape of my front door and the color of my bath towels. It had a shadow tall enough to walk me to the water. I said, "Eve," and she said, and put her hand on my shoulder and squeezed rhythm into me. I don't remember deciding stand, but I was standing. The spoon fell out of my mouth and rang the edge of the table and spun and spun. That coined sound again, and while it spun, I walked to the back door, not looking down at the low panel where the knocks like to come, and I set my ear to the wood where my ear fit like it had since I was a kid listening for thunder. On the other side, very close, someone breathed, and their breath smelled like someone else's breath when they've been asleep, sweet and stale. I breathed too, on purpose, and listened to how the two breaths didn't match. "Don't," Eve said softly. "I'm not," I said, which was true and wasn't. I wasn't opening. I was listening. He likes to look. Maybe he likes to listen too. I pressed my palm to the door, and it pressed back with that same half-inch dip, that same "I'm sitting next to you" feeling. The not voice said in my not mouth, very gently, "Next time, just step outside for a second." I closed my eyes and counted my teeth, and when I was done, I counted the cracks in the paint on the door frame, and when I was done with those, I counted the freckles on my forearm. I counted me. The breath on the other side got bored. It left disappointed. We made it to morning. We made it to noon. I decided I was done letting this thing share my days like a roommate who doesn't pay rent. So I did the stupid thing I knew I would do ever since the first whistle. I went to the water. Not at night. I'm dumb, not suicidal. At 2 in the afternoon, I parked by the public pier that sticks into the swamp like a rude finger. The boards creaked under my boots, and the heat slapped at my eyelids. A gator drifted 20 yards out like a log designed to ruin a day. Dragonflies stitched the air. The cypress knees stood like teeth around the roots. I wanted to see it in day, the place where the night got its breath. I don't know what I thought would happen. A sermon? A cleansing? A feeling of proportion? Maybe like when you stand next to the ocean and your own problems shrink to a pea and you can finally swallow it. The swamp isn't like the ocean. It doesn't make you small. It makes you complicated. I brought the cigar box because I'm the kind of idiot who needs props in a ritual. I set it on the splintered rail and opened it. Empty, of course. Empty like something was supposed to be inside, and the emptiness was the point. I said out loud, "I'm not food," because that's what I wanted the air to know. I said, "I'm not a plate," because Dolores said he wanted a plate. I said, "I'm not your look." The breeze that came across the water smelled like somebody opening a freezer full of old meat. The surface went flat like a muscle flexing, and a ripple moved where nothing moved. A blue heron lifted slow from a log and flapped twice, and then went still again like someone remembered it, and then forgot. A voice behind me said, "This is where it occurred." And I turned, and Larry stood on the pier with his hands in his pockets, shoulders rounded, hatless. He looked like a man about to apologize for something that wasn't his fault. He looked very alive. "No," I said, and my throat closed on the word. "No, Boothie, don't." He smiled that tired way he got at 4 a.m. and said, "It's okay. It's me. I just needed to tell you something." His eyes were wrong. The wrongness wasn't color or shape. It was the way you can't hang a picture straight no matter how you try. He took one step, and it was like a cricket chirping in the wrong rhythm. "You ain't packed the right thing," he said. I backed against the rail, and the cigar box fell into the water with a neat little plop I still hear at night. Larry reached into his pocket and pulled out a cigarette he didn't light and stuck it behind his ear like a man who knows he'll get to it. He said, "Come on," in a voice that wasn't a voice, and I saw the edge of the brim of a hat cut a line across the swamp's bright and cast a shade on the water where no shade should be, and the lines of the trees and the reflection bent around it like it was heavy. Eve's truck door slammed in the parking lot behind me like a gun. "Nope," she said from the pier's mouth, not loud, but enough. Larry's head twitched toward the sound with a motion that had too few frames in it. And then he smiled at me and took a step back and went thin like a bad TV losing signal. The brim stayed. The rest didn't. "Let's go," Eve said, and I went because I will follow that woman into the dumbest fire. We didn't talk on the ride home. I watched the swamp rear view get small and the hat lines stay the same size. That night, I did what I was told. Kettle, static, alarms, counting. At 3 in the morning, the whistling came back, and I realized I was hearing a tune. I called it 7 notes, but it wasn't notes. It was an old work song being held sideways, one I've heard men sing hauling rope. He'd found a way to take human effort and wear it to make labor into bait. He will end with a choice, the midwife had said. The choice came at 4:15 when the radio died. Not for lack of power, but as if someone had pressed 2 fingers to its throat. The kettle went quiet as if a hand settled over its mouth. The alarms all wound down together like a toy army surrendering. The apartment filled with a soft, profound hush I have only heard in hospitals after a monitor goes flatline. The whistle came once, bright as a star, and then a second voice came with it. Not in my head, not from a phone, but from under the floor, through the vents from the pipes, from every copper nail in the walls. It used my shape and my tenderness and said, "So kind you'd open a door for it. You can choose. You can look now and be mine, quick and done, easy like a slip into water. Or you can spend the rest of your stupid, curious life not looking, and I will walk with you. Always, and I will make your children step low when they hear me. Either way, you feed me. Either way, you make a sound." I did what I always do when a test is too big to think through. I picked something small. I put the spoon in my mouth. I didn't take it out. I bit down until the spoon tasted like battery and blood, and I breathed slow through my nose like a boxer. The choice sat there like a lit cigarette on carpet. I could stomp it and risk burning my foot, or I could stare at it until the couch went up. He didn't push. That scared me worse. He just waited, patient and sweet, like a lake you can't tell is moving until you fall in. Eve slid her hand along the couch cushion and found my knee and left it there heavy. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. We've done nights together before. Both of us try not to call old numbers we shouldn't call. The technique is the same. You live inside the next minute. Then the next one. He tried to sell me the easy death again. Not as words, as a shape. Me with no weight, me whispering, "Don't worry," and meaning it for the first time ever. He showed me my curiosity flattened like a pressed flower, all the ache gone. He offered peace like a barbiturate. I counted the callus on my ring finger. I counted the fillings in my molars. I counted 10 again, and when I ran out, I started over. The kettle kicked back to life first. It didn't start. It rose under a hand. The lid jittered. The radio, throat cleared, one dirty gob of static, then another, and then the clocks returned in a clatter of angry, out of sync bells. The quiet broke. The room filled with ugly living. I pictured the hat man on the other side of the door making a face like he'd tasted pennies. "Good boy," Eve said, too loud on purpose because the thing hated praise spoken in daylight voices. "Good. We wait." I didn't say I couldn't do another night. I didn't say I could. I just swallowed copper and let the kettle sing for me. I slept in slices, like cake stolen with a butter knife. In one slice I dreamed I was under the pier with Larry. He had both palms up as if to show he wasn't armed, which is exactly what you do when you are. In another slice, I dreamed of an old woman's hands tying red string around a doorknob. Not to keep something out, but to remind you that the knob is there. Morning scraped in. I took a shower hot enough to poach me and kept the radio going in the bathroom so the steam had a voice. The whistle tried the vent once, quick as a tone. The steam made it stumble. I felt mean. I liked it. Eve left around noon to shower at her place, and put on clothes that didn't smell like metal and fear. 3 more, she said. That's my line now. I can do 3 more. You said 2. I said, yeah, well, I'm an optimist today. She didn't look at the windows. That was the rule. Text me if the faucets spit rust. That means new company. I made eggs and left the pan on the burner, just enough to make it complain. The midwife text came as I ate standing up. You held. He'll lean. Don't agree. Don't argue either. He wants argument. He likes hot. What do I do then? I typed, yolk drying on the fork in my hand. Be boring. Boredom is a poison to him. Routine. Repetition. Count your own breath until he hates how human it is. I laughed out loud, one bark that scared me. I'm poison, I said to the room, and the room, for once, felt like it heard me and liked the joke. The doorbell rang. Not the low knocks. Not the child's polite rap. The bell. Twice. I put the pan on high and walked to the door and put my eye to the peephole without thinking and then pulled back quick, my heart kicking the door. Not because I'd seen him, because there was a woman there. Short, thick hair in a bun. Brown scrubs faded to mushroom color. Badge on a clip. Nurse. She didn't knock again. She didn't fidget. She looked at my door like she could see through it. In her left hand was an old school flip phone. In her right, a white paper bag the size of a lunch. Every rule I'd built said don't open. The sideways rules, the ones you use in the emergency room, said do. Say something, I said. Her eyes ticked toward the peephole, like she knew exactly where my Saturday. Tell Eve to stop cussing at the door, she said, not loud. He likes that. He thinks it's flirting. It was her. The voice with gravel, the breath that sounded like stairs. My hand floated to the chain lock and then stopped because I didn't want to be the guy who opens the door to a shape and calls it salvation. Do you want me to slide it under? She asked, lifting the bag. What is it? I asked through the door. Noise, she said, and a map. I don't have a dog, I said, because my mouth produces dumb when scared. You have neighbors, she said. They will start to like the noise after the second night when they aren't sleeping because of him. I undid the chain and opened to the length of the safety bar. She looked shorter up close. Strong. Her badge had a photo and a name that had been rubbed almost clean by 1,000 clothes. I could make out Dell, and that was it. She handed me the bag through the gap. You won't need it forever. What does he want? I asked. Really? To be looked at, she said. By anything with a soul. That's how he finds the seam. She tilted her head like she was listening to a heartbeat. He sat on your roof last night. Not the first time you've had company on a roof, I guess. She smiled once, no teeth. We count roofs around here. Why are you helping me? I asked, which is a shitty thing to ask someone handing you a lifeline. But I needed the shape of it. Because I bring things in and I bring things out, she said, like she'd ordered it off a menu. And I'm tired of seeing him win. She leaned in just enough that I could smell antiseptic on her scrubs. Don't pay me with anything that shines. Say thank you in ugly sounds. Thank you, I said, and then I made the sound my dad used to make when he'd squat down after mowing the yard. One long, relieved grunt. She laughed. It was like a pot lid lifted. Okay, she said. Okay. She tapped the bag. Win these and hang them low. He doesn't like things that touch the ground and make noise when they touch. He wants your attention up. Make him look down. What's your name? I asked because I wanted to have it in my mouth for when I needed courage. I don't like to be called, she said. Call the nurse. Call the midwife. Call the dispatcher if you can't help yourself. Any of those will ring me. You're real, I said, because I needed the floor to agree. So is he, she said, but not like you mean. She glanced at the roofline. He's hungry. Starve him. When you move, move quiet. When... I asked. When the water's wrong, she said. You'll know. It'll smell like pennies and rain, and the wind'll come from the swamp when the forecast says north. Then you go. Don't tell anyone but the woman who cusses at doors. She smiled again, tiny. She swears well. She left without turning her back to the yard. The light when she stepped off my porch shifted like a thought changed its mind. I shut the door. I opened the bag. Inside were 4 big brass sleigh bells on leather straps, scuffed with life, and a hand-drawn map on a piece of a paper placemat. The map showed my block, the ditch, the old gas station, the pier, and 3XS in red. Under my living room window, the foundation under the kitchen, and the roof line over the bedroom. In the corner, she'd written ugly sounds, low and constant. Count. Don't look. I hung the bells low so they kissed the floor, and then I did what we do. I made the living noisy. I turned the radio to static and taped the dial so it wouldn't drift. I boiled water until the windows wept. I wound the little alarms. I set a metronome app to 63 BPM because that was not quite my resting heart rate, and I wanted to trick him in the dumbest way. When I ran out of noises, I read the labels on jars out loud. Calcium chloride, sodium bicarbonate, just to lay words that were ugly and true into the room. He hated it. He tried the singing. He tried the knocks. He tried the children's laugh low to the floor as if they were playing with my bells. I didn't look. I counted and breathed like a man in a waiting room, pretending the TV is interesting. Around 2 in the morning, the water in the pipes changed. It smelled like pennies and rain. The air came from the wrong direction and lifted the hair on my arms, even though every window was shut. We go now, I texted Eve. On my way, she sent back. 2 minutes. I grabbed my bag and I grabbed nothing that shined. I left my framed photos. I shoved my wallet and my work boots into the bag, and I looked at my kitchen table and the coffee ring, and I told that ring thank you, because I'm not above superstition when it keeps me from doing something smart like staring. The bell under the back window jangled once, very soft, like a hand patting a dog. I didn't look. Eve blew her horn twice. I opened the front door, and the swamp air came in like a person. It was thick and wrong, and it had a taste like batteries. The trees behind the duplex across the street had gone still. The cicadas shut up as if a teacher had walked in. I locked the door out of habit, and the key stuck for a fraction, and I yanked it free like I was pulling a tooth. We were on the road in under 15 seconds. Eve had the truck pointed north before you could say sin. We ain't outrunning it, she said, and there wasn't fear in her voice, just data. We're outboring it. I laughed because I could not. Where? I asked. Laplace first, she said. Then further. You got cash. Some, I said. Enough to buy a room and some meat. We'll need the meat, she said. And when I looked at her, she shrugged. For the dog. What dog? The one I'm going to adopt, because that nurse put it in my head, she said. You can't do this without something that sleeps and farts and barks at nothing. The fan is great. The dog is ugly, living with teeth. The wind hit the truck from the side like the swamp was moving its shoulder into us. I texted the unknown number. We're moving. Good, came back. Don't make a story as you go. Just go. That night, a motel with a sagging mattress and a window that let in the wet. Eve slept on top of the covers with her boot on, knife in reach. I slept under the fan that rattled like every hotel fan, which is to say like God apologizing. I woke at 2 to the whistle at the door and the soft patter-patter of little knocks near the bottom panel. I turned the bathroom fan on high, and I lay with my mouth open and breath loud as if I had a cold, because the midwife said ugly living is all the shield we have. Something leaned hard against the door and then leaned away. On the other side of the wall, a man coughed, and the cough saved me. It said, "You aren't special." I love that cough to this day. By morning, we were in Baton Rouge, paying for a month in a place that used to be nice. The woman at the desk said, "No pets," and then watched Eve, decided arguments were expensive, and said, "Small pets." We brought in a small dog the next day that barked at the TV when people kissed. His shelter name was Music. We kept it on purpose. It felt like a dare. The first week in Baton Rouge, the whistle found us twice. It came thin through the AC unit like the unit had learned a new trick. The dog barked into the vent until he sneezed, and I called him good boy like it was a prayer. The midwife texted maps that weren't roads, they were currents. Imagine the swamp like a lung, she wrote. It breathes. He moves with that. You want to be on the exhale. That means you don't go to water on the night after a storm. You go shopping then, you go to movies then, you make your living loud in groups. How long? I asked her. She took an hour and typed back until your shine dulls. Don't be sad. It means you got scar tissue. Scar tissue is a kind of armor. The new warehouse hired me days. First shift, pallets and shrink wrap, and a supervisor who chewed gum instead of toothpicks. Normal fatigue started to replace the old kind. My brain didn't hum like a live wire all the time. At lunch, if I sat facing a window and counted trucks in the lot, the urge to look at the line of trees beyond faded by half. One day, a month in, I heard a work song in the back of my head and my stomach turned cold. I froze. Then the song turned and I realized the guy in the next aisle over was actually humming it. A real guy with a real mouth and a real sweat stain under his collar. I wanted to hug him. He looked at me like I'd lost it when I said, "Don't whistle that one." And I laughed and covered it with bad luck. I called Dolores once more to say I'd moved, to say I was still counting, to say I was keeping the steam singing. She said, "My boy comes better in my dreams now. He stands farther away." She said, "The hat don't fit right on him no more." That means something. I told her thank you. She said, "Tell the midwife thank you if you see her." And I said, "I don't see her." "Good," she said. "Means you ain't halfway." In Baton Rouge, the nights got stranger in a different human way. Sirens, couples fighting through drywall, music from car trunks. The swamp doesn't like competition. The whistle came only once every handful of nights. We kept our routines like medicine. The dog slept with his head on my foot. I learned to love the way he stank when he got wet. The midwife told me where to buy bells at a feed store so I could return hers. I drove them back to the gas station and left them on top of the ice chest with a note that said "ugly thanks" and a smiley face because I didn't know how else to mark the world with gratitude without shining. I thought about closing the loop. I thought about going back to Manchac and the pier and saying something smart to the water. The midwife texted me, "Don't do that," before I could type it. I asked, "Are you in my head?" She sent back, "I'm in everybody's head who listens at a door." That's the job. The poor called me once. "Done?" He said, "You hear about the accident?" And my mouth went dry. 2 new guys. Night crew. One fell between a stack and the rail, and the other went looking the wrong way and fell too. That's what the report said. The whistle in my ear went lazy as a yawn. "I'm sorry," I told Dan, and he said, "It's not your fault," which is the kind of sentence that makes a man lie awake. I told the midwife. She said, "You can't eat for him. Don't try." I said, "How you do this all day?" She said, "I bring in and I bring out. I go to funerals. I go to baptisms. Neither of them sticks sometimes. Doesn't mean I stop." He found a house to rent that didn't back up to water. It backed up to a highway, which is a different kind of river. She hung bells in the laundry room and let music bark at laundry like it was an enemy. We built a small, dumb routine you could draw with 4 crayons. Work, food, noise, count, don't look, sleep. Some nights we let it be quiet on purpose, to prove to ourselves we weren't prisoners. Those nights when my brain went, "Hey, what if we just peeked at the glass slider to the tiny patio?" I would taste the spoon in my mouth and I'd count my molars and think about what the midwife said. He wants neat ends. Don't give him one. One afternoon, Larry showed up in broad daylight at the foot of my bed. I know how that sounds, but here's what I mean. I was between sleep and wake, the place where your pillow becomes a radio, and I felt the mattress dip. It dipped like a weight sat there that knew how to sit. Tobacco and swamp. He didn't talk. He just rested his elbows on his knees and put his face in his hands like a man who worked a double and couldn't do it again. He didn't lift his head. He didn't show me the wrong eyes. He didn't sell me anything. "I'm trying," I told him. "I'm trying to be boring." He chuckled without moving and the sound didn't hurt. It lived. He tapped my shin twice with 2 knuckles, a rhythm he'd used on the oil drums, the one that meant breaks over. He got up and the mattress rose. He was gone. I lay there with tears going into my ear and didn't move for a long time because moving would make it a story. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that some moments you let sit in your chest without airing them out. I still make mistakes. I still look sometimes. It's dumb and human. In the frozen food aisle, he's there in the doors if the light hits wrong, a hat on the reflection of my own shoulders, and I catch myself staring like I'm trying to place an actor from a show I half-watched. In parking lots, I hear a kid laugh, and my stomach tries to jump out my throat. On the worst days, right before sleep, he pitches the old bargain soft. Look now and be done, or don't look and carry me forever. On those nights, I don't get brave. I get petty. I turn on the fan. I chip a little piece of ice and suck it loud. I breathe like a mouth breather and count the dents in the ceiling texture. That popcorn plaster that looks like the moon. Ugly living. Music snores. Eve swears at some video on her phone. It's not triumph. It's not an ending. It's an irritant I've decided to be. You want a neat moral? You want a clean cut? I get it. I used to think stories owed us that. But he loves a neat moral. He eats a clean cut. He wears tidy endings like a red flower in his lapel. So here's what I'll tell you instead. I folded the map the nurse drew and put it in my wallet, and it got soft at the corners from heat and sweat. I kept counting. I installed a loud-ass bathroom fan in the new place and let it sing like a bad choir. I learned to cook with a pan that screams when it's too hot, and I don't turn it down right away. I leave radios between stations for a few minutes when I come home, just to cut a channel through the room. I sit on the couch at night, and I let my eyes get bored and I don't walk them to the glass. I'm teaching myself an uglier kind of faith. On the day I drove back to Manchac to sign some last paperwork that had finally caught up with me, the air smelled like lightning and salt and rust. The water was wrong. I could feel it in my teeth. I parked at the office and stayed in the truck, AC on, counting the breaths till I could turn around and leave without having to go inside. I watched the cypress line ripple like something big moved under the skin of the world. People came and went with clipboards like we're all immune to our own endings. My phone buzzed. A new unknown number. For a second, my veins went ice. Then I read it. Don't be brave today. Be boring. Nurse. I put the truck in reverse. I left the paperwork for another boring day. In the rear view, the pier looked like a finger pointing at God. And at the end of it, if I let my eyes unfocus the way you do when you're trying to see a Magic Eye poster, I could trace the line of a brim where the world's glare broke. I didn't sharpen my focus. I let my eyes go soft. I counted my teeth instead. I turned the radio to static and let it fill the cab like fog. I drove north. On the way home, I stopped at a feed store and bought bells and a new dog bowl and a handful of cheap kitchen timers. The kid at the register said, "You throwing a party?" And I said, "Yeah, the ugliest party you've never been to." He laughed and it lived. That night, the wind came from the right direction. The water smelled like wet stone instead of pennies. The dog barked at a moth. Eve stubbed her toe and yelled the kind of word a door doesn't like. I put the spoon in my mouth and held it until the urge to check the patio eased away a bad. It eases if you rub the skin around it instead of scratching. I fell asleep, counting the breath in my chest, the slow rise and fall, the ridiculous fact that I get to do it again and again until I don't. He still knows me. He still waits. He's patient and I'm not. That's his edge. Mine is smaller and meaner. Mine is that I can make a kettle sing and a fan rattle and a dog snore and a human breath keep time. Mine is that I can be boring in the face of a thing that wants me to look. I won't give in that plate. I won't shine for him on purpose. If, one night when the frogs go quiet and the whistling tries to thread itself under your door, you think of me, don't make me a neat story. Don't make me a warning worth repeating at parties. Make your living loud. Count your teeth. Put a spoon in your mouth and taste the penny and call it good. If your phone rings and a voice you want to trust tells you to look, tell it no and mean it with your whole bored heart. Tell it no in ugly sounds. Tell it no until morning. And if you mess up, if you look, if the brim slices the room and your eyes land and stick and the thing knows the weight and shine of you, call the nurse, call the midwife, call the dispatcher. She'll bring you out if you're halfway. She'll hand you a paper bag with bells inside. She'll tell you what I'm telling you now, with the same breath that smells like coffee and bleach. Don't be brave. Be stubborn. Be uninteresting to a hungry thing. Close your eyes. Count. Breathe. Live ugly. I keep doing it. I keep making noise. Some nights I hear Larry on the oil drums counting us in. Some nights I hear children in raincoats moving past the edge of the property like a school of fish deciding where to eat. Some nights the Hat Man sits on the roof and taps the shingles with a finger as long as a nail and waits for me to give him a tidy end. I don't. I give him a kettle. I'm not cured. I'm not safe. I'm not damned either. I'm a man who moved inland and learned the shape of his own want and decided not to make an altar of it. I've got a dog that barks at goddamn laundry. I've got a cousin with a mouth like a knife. I've got a nurse who answers texts she shouldn't have to answer. I've got breath. I've got a spoon. My name's Mike. I worked nights on the edge of the man shack, and I learned how to starve a shadow without dying of it. If you hear the whistle, don't look.